Hello. The question of reservations can no longer be answered through lessons in history or hypocrisy, but only through hard solutions. And here they are. Number one, reservations must be targeted and never blanket so that they cannot be turned into instruments of appeasement. Number two, reservations must be time bound so that they cannot be used for endless political one-upmanship. Number three, reservations must be one time, one family, so that the most deserving cannot be crowded out by those already emancipated. Number four, reservations must be realized through extra seats so that merit-based selection processes cannot be compromised. And number five, reservations, if extended to the private sector, must never be forced but offered through only choice. Let me now elaborate on each point. Number one, reservations must be targeted and not blanket so that they are not weaponized for appeasement. The original purpose of reservations was to uplift the most underprivileged, the most discriminated against, and to emancipate them. Yet, increasingly, they have become a device for furthering appeasement and placating either a religious or a caste vote bank. I support reservations for Dalits and OBCs, but it is ironic that it is Rahul Gandhi's Congress that has historically shown little sympathy for Dalits, OBCs and the underprivileged. Even though the constitution required the setting up of a commission to examine OBC reservations, it was a non-Congress government that set up the Mandal Commission and another non-Congress government that implemented it. Rajiv Gandhi himself opposed the Mandal implementation, calling it, quote, a can of worms. To illustrate how shamelessly the Congress placates its Muslim vote bank at the expense of the underprivileged, the Congress government in Karnataka has restored a 4% blanket reservation for Muslims, in effect declaring that all Muslims, including millionaires and billionaires, belong to the backward class and may now claim the quota. Treating every Muslim in Karnataka as backward is bizarre and makes a mockery of the very reason reservations exist, to help the most underprivileged and socially discriminated. The Rohini Commission found that 97% of reserved jobs and seats go to only 25% of OBC subcastes, while just 10 OBC communities corner as much as 25% of reserved central jobs and institutional seats. An astonishing 37% of OBC communities have zero representation in jobs. I think the time has come to change the C in the OBC from class to caste. Keeping it as class opens a backdoor for non-Hindus to claim OBC benefits, which is unfair to Hindu backward castes. Does the Supreme Court possess the courage to do the right thing? I doubt it. As Orwell observed, in times of universal deceit, telling the truth becomes a revolutionary act. Although I welcome the recent Supreme Court judgment that SC/STs who convert to a non-Hindu faith cannot continue to receive all the benefits and reservations, it is embarrassing that such a ruling was even necessary. Consider an analogy. A doctor who wears a lab coat and a stethoscope receives the privileges of being a doctor. He then discards both, becomes a policeman, dons khaki and carries a cane. Should he still receive the benefits he enjoyed as a doctor? Dalits receive benefits because of their caste, not because they are poor. For there are millions of upper caste general category individuals who are poorer but receive none of these reservations. Reservations were created expressly as a redress for caste oppression. The Constitution Scheduled Caste Order of 1950 and subsequent amendments restrict SC status to Hindus because the caste system is regarded as unique to Hinduism. Islam and Christianity doctrinally reject caste. Therefore, converts cannot claim compensation for a hierarchy their new faith supposedly explicitly abolishes. Extending benefits to Dalit Muslims or Dalit Christians distorts the original constitutional intent of correcting a faith-specific injustice. It also creates perverse incentives and undermines policy integrity. Once reservations become portable across religions, individuals and communities have a rational motive to convert strategically for quotas rather than for genuine faith. This has already produced documentary cases of reservation shopping and mass conversion drives. continuing benefits after conversion dilutes the finite pool of seats and jobs meant for the most disadvantaged within the original Dalit pool and erodes public trust in the entire affirmative action system. Other religions must address their own internal inequalities, and there are inequalities. But granting SC benefits to converts shifts the burden onto the Hindu quota system while allowing Christianity and Islam to escape accountability for any residual caste-like discrimination within their own folds. For example, amongst Dalit Christians or Pasmanda Muslims. If Abrahamic religions truly have no caste, their converts should seek upliftment through community or state schemes that are religion neutral. Otherwise, the policy becomes an unfair subsidy that rewards exit from Hinduism without requiring the new faiths to dismantle any lingering hierarchies. And as for Indic faiths, Article 25(2)(b) and Explanation 2 of the Constitution themselves recognize that for the purpose of social reforms, including reservations, Hindus include Sikhs, Buddhists and Jains. If Dalit Muslims or Dalit Christians want reservations, let them first declare that Islam and Christianity possess a caste system. Will they dare to? Number 2, reservations must be time-bound so that they do not fall victim to political one-upmanship. The Constitution originally limited political SC/ST reservations under Article 334 to 10 years, a ceiling that our politicians of every party and ideology have repeatedly extended through successive amendments. Justice J.B. Pardiwala of the Supreme Court noted in the 2022 EWS judgment that Dr. Ambedkar's underlying idea was to introduce reservation for only 10 years in order to promote social harmony rather than entrench a permanent entitlement. Prakash Ambedkar, grandson of Dr. Ambedkar, has likewise publicly endorsed the principle that reservations must remain finite and subject to review rather than become an indefinite political inheritance. Once a remedial policy is stripped of any sunset or mandatory review clause, it ceases to be a temporary corrective and becomes a permanent competitive resource that successive parties escalate for electoral advantage, turning social justice into a zero-sum bidding war. A fixed or periodically reviewed time limit compels the state to measure actual outcomes, educational attainment, income mobility and sub-caste representation, rather than allowing the policy to solidify into a hereditary claim that benefits only those already emancipated while leaving the most deprived behind. This is exactly what is happening. Why then do our politicians still lack the political courage to restore the temporary character that even the framers and Dr. Ambedkar's own lineage recognized as essential? Does the concept of reservations make the non-depressed and non-deprived classes suffer disadvantage for no faults of theirs? The answer is yes, and therefore reservations cannot be applied indefinitely and must be time-bound. Number 3, reservations must be one time, one family, so that the most deserving do not lose out to the already emancipated. This principle is so elementary that it is strange our politicians have never adhered to it. Stranger still that the beneficiaries of reservations have not thought twice about depriving their own community members by snatching the benefits themselves. Once a family has secured a government job or admission to a professional course through reservation, it has crossed that threshold of social and economic backwardness that the policy was meant to address. Allowing the next generation or the same individuals repeatedly to claim the same benefit simply transfers limited seats and posts from the truly deprived to those who have already escaped deprivation. This is reinforced by the fact that a significant percent of scheduled caste officers in Group A or Class 1 central services are themselves children of earlier SC officers, showing clear intergenerational capture. Perpetual family level entitlement creates an elite so-called creamy layer within the reserved categories themselves, concentrating opportunity among a narrow section while the poorest and the most backward subgroups remain excluded, thereby defeating the constitutional objective of broad-based upliftment rather than dynastic advantage. As already stated, data from the Rohini Commission showed that 97% of central OBC reserved jobs and educational seats went to 25% of the OBC communities, with nearly 1,000 subcastes recording zero representation. Supreme Court observations, including by judges from the Dalit community itself, have repeatedly questioned why the children of IAS, IPS officers should continue to claim reservations when their families no longer suffer the disadvantages of those still living in villages without access. Restricting benefits to one time per family would directly address this concentration, free up seats for the genuinely emancipated deprived within the same categories, and restore the temporary, targeted character that affirmative action was intended to have. Number 4, reservations must be through extra added seats so that they do not affect merit-based selection. This idea, honestly, if followed, would remove any acrimony that the concept of reservations currently generates between communities. Merit stays untouched and the depressed continue to be emancipated. What could be better than that? All that is required is a cutoff date at which the number of available seats is fixed. By first locking the number of pure merit seats at a cutoff date based on existing institutional capacity, and then creating additional seats only for the reserved categories, the open category remains completely untouched by reservation. No general category candidate loses a seat, no rank is displayed, and the selection into the base seats continues strictly on marks or rank. This removes the zero-sum conflict that currently fuels resentment and bitterness between communities. The depressed classes still receive affirmative action and get emancipated, while the principle of merit is preserved in absolute terms for the original seats. Crucially, it ends the perception that one community's gain is another's loss. After all, discrimination is discrimination. There is no such thing as a positive discrimination beyond its vogue or metaphorical use. Second, it aligns reservation with institutional expansion rather than redistribution of a fixed pie, exactly what our parliamentarians did when they refused to take 33% of the existing 543 Lok Sabha seats for women, which would have reduced their own numbers. Instead, they increased the number of Lok Sabha seats to 815 and then applied the reservation percentage to the new total. This left the original 543 seats untouched by reservation. If politicians can do it for their own domain, why can't the same principle not be replicated everywhere? Third, it makes the policy politically and socially sustainable because every community sees either status quo or gain, never loss. Importantly, merit stays pure because the open seats are decided solely by competitive ranking without any quota overlay. The extra seats are a pure add-on that does not dilute or contaminate that ranking, and once the base is frozen, further growth in capacity can be shared or used to enlarge the reserved pool without ever shrinking the merit pool. So, emancipation of the depressed and protection of merit become simultaneous rather than antagonistic goals. To achieve this, one can devise a simple formula as follows. On the cutoff date, fix the number of open merit seats as B. Let R be the desired overall reservation ratio, for example, 0.5 for 50%. So the reserved seats S would be R by 1 minus R into B. Total seats T become B plus S. Case in point, an example is the women's reservation B. Let me illustrate this. B was 543, the number of Lok Sabha seats. R was 0.33, 33% reservation. Therefore, reserved seats S came out to be 267 and total seats T became 810, which is what the government promised, so that the present number of 543 seats remain untouched by reservations. This formula would also address the hypocrisy of those who demand reservations yet refuse them in their own sectors, where they insist on pure merit-based selection. Look, if giving reservations is a moral obligation, and it is, then why are reservations excluded from certain domains and sectors, the most prominent being the higher judiciary? Why do judges suddenly invoke merit when appointing their own, but think of quotas when appointing doctors, scientists and other professionals? Is that not hypocrisy itself? Another case in point is the fact that our minorities support reservations and call them a moral obligation towards the depressed classes, yet do not implement them in minority institutions, even though those institutions are funded by the government. Where does all their morality suddenly disappear to when it comes to giving Dalits reservations in minority institutions? And speaking of merit, quote, I dislike any kind of reservation, more particularly in service. I react strongly against anything which leads to inefficiency and second-class standards. I want my country to be a first-class country in everything. The moment we encourage the second rate, we are lost. If we go in for reservations on a communal and caste basis, we swamp the bright and the able people and remain second rate or third rate. The only real way to help a backward group is to give opportunities for good education. Help should be given on economic considerations and not on caste, unquote. Who said this? You guessed it. Jawaharlal Nehru on 27th June 1961. Number 5. Reservations, if at all applied to the private sector, must not be forced but should be through choice. I want to address an issue that hangs over us, and I fear all politicians are going to handle it wrongly. Let me explain. Does this country believe we have a moral obligation to provide reservations for the depressed classes? Yes, I believe so as well. To repeat, until the depressed and the deprived classes are brought up and emancipated, reservations should exist in a targeted and time-bound manner, as I stated earlier. It follows that the faster the depressed classes are emancipated, the sooner reservations will end, which is the ultimate goal if the reduction in merit, community discrimination, or loss of national fiscal resources caused by the policy of reservations is to be eliminated. As simple as that. Now, given that the majority of jobs are in the private sector and only about 2% of jobs in India are government jobs, the fastest route to ending reservations is to create a mechanism by which more beneficiaries receive reservations in the shortest possible time. 2 decades after former President Ram Nath Kovind called the introduction of reservations in the private sector because government jobs were shrinking, the Union Minister of State for Social Justice and Environment under the NDA, A. Narayanaswamy, said there is a need for reservation in the private sector too. Quote, the reservation in the private sector should be implemented not just based on caste, but on the domicile to give jobs to the local residents, he said, echoing President Covid's view that jobs have been dwindling in the government sector after computerization. Previously, many BJP MPs had demanded reservations in the private sector, including Dr. Yashwant Singh and Sangh Priya Gautam. This was also the recommendation of the National Commission for Backward Classes in 2016 and welcomed by all parties, including the BJP. Back in February 2023, at the 85th AICC session, the Congress pledged its commitment to implementing SC, ST, OBC reservations in the private sector. Now, if the moral obligation is to bring up the depressed classes as quickly as possible, then it is not only the state's duty, I believe it is also incumbent upon all of us, for we constitute the state, its moral and financial fiber. For this reason, I agree with former President Ram Nath Kovind that the private sector should have reservations for Dalits. But because I also believe in private enterprise, in the state not controlling it, and in the concept of choice, I believe that reservations in the private sector must not be forced but rather nudged, if need be, through incentives, exactly as the state provides incentives to companies that do social good, that promote women in the workforce, or that help employ state domicile candidates. This allows the private sector company to choose whether it wants reservation or not, just as a private sector company chooses whether to set up a factory in a state that offers a tax incentive or in one that does not. For example, the state gives free or subsidized land to private bodies to set up schools and hospitals in return for the schools and hospitals to provide free education or free treatment to the depressed classes. The private bodies have a choice either to accept it or to buy non-subsidized land. Many private enterprises choose not to accept the government incentives. BITS, for instance, does not have reservations. Choice, not coercion, is the bedrock of economic and social progress. And our politicians are choosing the latter, and that is wrong. These then are my views and arguments on reservations. Views that have not changed for 2 decades. If my remedies and suggestions are implemented, reservations can end in 20 years based on the population analysis and the conditions I have placed on their implementation. 2047 can herald an India without reservations, an India fully emancipated, wholly united, truly Viksit. The choice is ours. There is scientific data to back the finding that cumulative structural disadvantage is not erased by equal formal opportunity. It cannot be denied that centuries of exclusion has produced interlocking deficits in land ownership, social capital, nutritional status, gender and economic openings, early cognitive stimulation and intergenerational wealth. These have compounded into measurable gaps, scientifically proven, in readiness, performance and navigation through equal opportunities. Reservations based on caste, gender or economic reduce this gap. Again, scientifically proven, but they cannot be provided indefinitely, for then they result in doing more harm than good. To summarize, reservations must remain a targeted tool for the truly underprivileged, not a permanent political instrument. They must be time-bound so that they do not become an endless electoral contest. They must be limited to one generation per family so that the already emancipated do not crowd out the still deprived. They must be implemented through extra seats so pure merit is never diluted, and if extended to the private sector, they must be offered only through choice rather than compulsion. Anything else turns the remedial policy of reservations into a weapon of appeasement, dynastic capture and permanent division.